getting to see people before and after is incredible. To give people this whole new sense of awareness and then help them, kind of help give them the tools to kind of, adopt a new way of being that's more positive for them and the people around them is, I don't know, there's not much more that I think is more inspiring than that. It's amazing.
Hey listeners, welcome back to Third Ways Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Paul Austin, and today we have another special guest, Neil Markey, the co-founder and CEO of Beckley Retreats. Neil, welcome to the show. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So the place that I want to start is a little unique. And sometimes I just ask, guests, hey, give us a little bit of your background and tell us how you got into plant medicine. And we'll get to that eventually because I think it's an important part of the story. But first, I would love to start at, I think, a family business that you and your brother and your dad ran for a long time, or maybe are still running, Creative Metal Design. And just tell us a little bit about that origin story, the evolution of it, and your role in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that business. It's my father's business. He started it, 50 years ago now almost. And he was mostly a sole proprietor for his entire career. He would kind of work on projects on his own, but he would do ornamental railings and gates and sculpture. And he's done some cool stuff, really creative, beautiful stuff. He did the gates to the Statue of Liberty when they redid them in the 80s. So these big, huge, beautiful bronze pieces. And he's done some really cool, weird sculpture. I love that business because it's craftsmanship. It's high quality. They're building stuff that will last for like literally hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's kind of the anti-disposable mindset. It's like get something that is functional art that you love. And now, I'm a partner in it. But my brother really is kind of the guy taking over the reins. And they've figured out this kind of beautiful opportunity where I think there's more people that really want quality and are turning away from the disposable junk. But there's less and less fabricators and people that can do the art. So, I mean, it's a cool little niche business that builds beautiful stuff. Thank you for opening with that. That's like close to my heart. And my dad and my brother are amazing. And now they've built kind of like a whole team around this, beautiful art form. It's really cool.
And I think that capacity for creation, right? And what you said, craftsmanship, right? It's not mass commodification. It's custom. There's an aesthetic to it. It's really beautiful. And my sense is what you're building and creating with Beckley Retreats is very similar in some ways. And so I'd love to and that's why I think coming back to that full circle would be interesting because I see a lot of that overlap and similarity with what it is that you're creating.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, they're passion projects. They're labors of love. I think that I believe in that work that my brother and father are doing. I think it's beautiful. I think that it's important for us to kind of maintain that art form. I think it's better for the planet when people actually make investments in things and have fewer things than just like a bunch of junk that they just like kind of, dispose of. And then, Beckley's the same way. I mean, we're trying to, do it in a heart-centered way. And I believe that we're helping people. And I believe that, these mindsets that we can help, these kind of new shifted mindsets are really positive for folks that embrace these practices and this programming. So, and we're at the forefront of something. I mean, you yourself as well, and all the amazing people that are kind of in this space pushing this new way of living and being forward. So it's really exciting. Yeah, and I love creating and building, and especially when I think that what we're doing is good for like humanity.
Absolutely. And so I want to circle back to that because before we get too deep, I would love just the sort of 5-minute overview of Neil Markey. And, you were an a special ops army captain. You worked for McKinsey for a period of time. You're now from what I saw, you were a chief commercial officer for a huge private equity company, and so your path has been sort of there's been myriad sort of things, and my sense is there have been some big shifts, paradigm shifts, particularly from meditation and psychedelics, that have now led you into what you're doing now. So I don't obviously want to tell your full story, but I would love to hear like how has that unfolded? How did that unfold? Maybe a good place to even start is, why did you initially join the Army? Why did you become a special ops Army captain, and kind of how did things unfold from there?
Yeah, I'll see if I can do it I'll try and do it in 5
or
but
7 minutes.
I grew up
take whatever time
7.
you want.
Well, yeah. I grew up in Maryland, and then, I kind of learned early. I had a bit of a gift in math, and then I ended up at University of Maryland. I was studying math, and I thought I was going to go do like cryptology or something at the intelligence agencies, which are all, right down the street from University of Maryland, and Maryland sends a ton of math grads to the 3-letter places. And but then September 11th happened, and that was like a huge day in my life. And from the top of the football stadium at University of Maryland, you could see the smoke from the Pentagon, and it was just, for a lot of Americans, this huge day. And then, long story short, I ended up in the military. I left school. I thought the United States was at risk. I believed that we needed to do something, and I thought I was being a patriot. And I ended up enlisting for a bit, and then I came back and did the officer training program, and then went in as a lieutenant. And I ended up in Iraq leading an infantry lieutenant, or leading an infantry platoon as a lieutenant. And by the time we got there, we had learned that this weapons of mass destruction thing was completely wrong, right? And so it was a challenging time, because we were still like putting people at risk, and we had put Iraq into a civil war. It's arguably the biggest foreign policy mistake of the United States history, and we were in the middle of it, and it was like, what a shit show. And so I was there for almost a year, and then came back, and I got like lucky. Honestly, it's a lot of luck, timing, and you got to have some people supporting you. But I got a chance to go try out for the Ranger Regiment, which is like a really small special operations unit, and I went there. And I was already starting to kind of have some struggles. I had a head injury. The environments are quite toxic. Guys are getting hurt. It's just a lot on the central nervous system. And then the Ranger Regiment was challenging too. Although part of me loved it. It was really storied times to be there, and I was more removed. I was more support there. So like, hats off to the guys that were like kind of really in it. But I was super proud to be in that unit and like do what I could. Leroy Petrie got the Medal of Honor when I was there. Obama was talking about the missions on the news that these guys were doing. So it was exciting. We had all the coolest weapons and gadgets, and then, kind of came back circle with the intelligence community that I had always thought that I was going to be a part of, and, work closely with them. And, but it was traumatic. I mean, guys were getting hurt. Guys were getting killed. At one point in time, we had 3 suicides in 90 days. The mental health was in crisis. And, by the time I did my first Ranger deployment, a lot of these guys had done their 10th or 11th. So it was just that the trauma in the organization was like incredible. And I got out after 2 deployments to Afghanistan. And then I went to Columbia University for grad school, and I was doing a program there. And, the brotherhood was gone. The mission was gone. I was in New York City, and I was going through a divorce, and I was in a bad shape, mental health. I was really spinning. Although outside looking in, I was doing really well. I was at a really good school. I had been this highly ranked officer, and I was getting job offers at really prestigious companies. But there was a point where I was starting to scare myself with my own thoughts. I was like, this isn't good. And I'm kind of isolating, and, I had tried lots of different SSRIs and anti-anxiety medications and sleeping pills, and nothing was working. And then, I think, say by the grace of God, whatever, met this man by the name of Hom Nguyen, who was doing his PhD there and was a very seasoned meditator and ran this place called the Mind-Kind Institute. And he saw I was struggling. Like he could see right through my kind of tough exterior, and he took me under his wing and he taught me meditation. And that was this beginning of opening into a new way of being, and my central nervous system kind of starting to settle, get out of the fight or flight, like get a bit more smooth and sync with things. And then through that network of connections of people in New York that are meditators and consciousness seekers, I had my first experience with the high dose psilocybin, but with intention. You know, I had done it in my youth recreationally, but had never tried it as a way to heal. And this was 10 years ago, so 2012. And that was profound, you know, and that then sent me on, you know, this chapter of where I was in grad school and had some free time and was studying meditation and studying different religions and going on lots of different long form meditation programs and different psychedelic retreats in the US on the underground and in, you know, different parts of Central America. And there's like a long history and some incredible nonprofits out there that have been getting special operations guys down into, you know, Mexico to do treatment. And so there's kind of like there's this history around that. And then I started a business with my brother and kind of adjacent to my father's business we were talking about. And I was doing well. I was heading in a better direction. My anxiety was going away. I was sleeping. I didn't feel as frantic. And then I finished school. I moved home, was working on this startup full time, did a teacher's certification in meditation, was teaching meditation to mostly business people because of the MBA. But then I was teaching special operations guys and was teaching intelligence agency guys. And then was doing that and was doing well. I had all the things. I had community, I had purposeful work, I was in nature a lot, I had a really strong meditation practice and like mentors that were kind of, you know, helping me. And then I had been deferring this job offer with McKinsey and Company. And I asked them for another deferral because things were going well. And I was like, let me do this for another year. And they were like, no, we're not going to be your permanent backup plan, man. Like, we're McKinsey. And I was like, all right, that's fair. And so I ended up, you know, I'd always wanted to see behind the curtain. So I ended up going, and, you know, part of me loved being there. It was very intellectually stimulating. It's kind of cool for a lower class kid or a lower middle class kid from Maryland to be, you know, in boardrooms and working at this kind of high level of business, and your ego loves that. And I got to co-lead the internal mindfulness program that was just kind of getting up and going with a friend. So I was super proud of that, and I was fascinated by that. And but then that was no question, now looking back, the period where my mental health started going the wrong way. And what I've learned is like environment matters, and, you know, alignment with the work matters. And there's just the reality that a lot of the projects and stuff I did there, weren't projects that I should be doing, you know, and there's amazing people there. But the environment is not the best environment for, you know, well-being and leaving a peaceful existence. And then I ended up, you know, having more anxiety come back. And then I was at the end of my McKinsey time and got this job offer to go do private equity stuff that was, you know, a lot of money and very fancy. But that was even worse. I mean, that was even more kind of dehumanizing work. That was all about the money, and people weren't even shy about it there. And it just brings out the worst in people. And it was a lot of times, you know, we were making wealthy people wealthier at the expense of workers, and it felt horrible. But I'd lost my way, you know, and then I did that for a handful of years, and I ended up, you know, in my last role, I led this restructuring for a PE portfolio company, and then the CEO liked me and asked me if I'd be, you know, an executive for the company. And this was a huge thing for me career wise. It was a executive level role. I was the youngest executive by 16 years. So again, most people outside looking in were like, oh wow, look at Neil professionally. But then, you know, I did that for a bit, but I ended up miserable. I ended up basically, you know, back in the same spot I was coming out of the military, with all the anxiety and all of the, you know, relationship troubles and the alcohol and this just like, you know, out of sync life. And also like realizing that so many of my peers were feeling this and living this way, and they didn't have combat experience. They just lived in shitty work environments for a long time. And I was like, this is madness, and I'm leaving. And I left, and this was a few years ago, and I like knew how to be well. So I got back to it, and I got back into meditation, and then this whole thing with Beckley has just been super organic, which I think is like a good signal. And that was way more than 7 minutes, and I didn't even get you to like the retreats part. Maybe stop there for a sec. Sorry.
I love it. And I think what's unique about your story is it's almost like a spiral in that you went in, you did combat, you popped out, you found meditation, you found psychedelics, you did your initial sort of round of healing, but it was almost like you didn't have enough of the intensity in a way, and there was maybe something about your nervous system or something about where you were at that you needed to double down and go even deeper into it, which is probably giving you some then incredible business experience in terms of what you did with McKinsey and what you did, at the private equity company. Yeah. And now you've sort of popped out the other side. It's like almost this second mountain. David Brooks, who's an author, wrote this book, The Second Mountain. And I'm almost feeling that's sort of what's happening now with you and Beckley Retreats, is you're really dropping into something that is what you really want to do in the long term.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I mean, I had a lot of pain and trauma along that path. But now, like, oh, thank God for all of it. Like it kind of has given me the skills and the experience and the credibility, I think, to kind of do this work, well and with credibility. And now I do feel like this is my life's work. Like this, helping people find meditation and a different way of existing in the world is what I think I was put on this earth to do. I just had to go through these chapters to learn some things, but I hope I can have 10 smoother years, but you never know. And
the psychedelic space, it's interesting, having been in this now for 7 years, I mean, more like 4 to 5 years full time. It's deceptively challenging, even from a business perspective, largely because the legal landscape is so uncertain, if you will. And so what I've learned more than anything is adaptability and navigating uncertainty, and the ability to sort of iterate even as a CEO is super central and important, because you don't know what the landscape's going to look like a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, right? And I will say that this is becoming increasingly true of most things in this day and age, is what it seems like. And so psychedelics, meditation, these contemplative practices really help us to navigate uncharted waters without losing our cool.
Yes,
so to say.
Exactly. Yeah, and this space is it's complex. But I know we're helping people, you know what I mean? Like, it's so clear to me. And I think we are bringing something like, there's lots of people doing this, not in any way saying it's just Beckley, but this collective is bringing something new and beautiful to the world, you know what I mean? That the world desperately needs. So it's an incredibly exciting time. And it's a real humbling experience to get an opportunity to kind of do this work, particularly with Amanda, who I love and think is an absolute icon. And, yeah, it's been really fun.
Amanda she's quite the person. Which so you're the first from my memory. I think you're the first person we've interviewed on the podcast that's working for Beckley. At some point, I would love to have Amanda on. I'm sure we will, but we haven't had that chance yet. So I'd love if we could just zoom out a little bit. I'm sure some of our listeners know about Beckley, have heard about Beckley, are familiar with Beckley, but there may be others who are not. So I'd love if you could just give us a little bit of the synopsis of what is the Beckley Foundation, and particularly in the last 2 to 3 years, how has the foundation grown into, Beckley Waves and Beckley SciTech and Beckley Retreats, and just tell us a little bit about that sort of evolution and growth.
Yeah, it's a cool story. I hope that it gets told more widely. So yeah, it really starts with this woman, Amanda Fielding, who's from the UK. She's actually British royalty. She's a countess, which only adds to the mystique. And, she had some experiences when she was young with LSD and other psychedelics. And she just like instantly was like, this could change the world. Like these things are so powerful. And so she really just through sheer charisma and like willpower was able to rally kind of the world's leading scientists on psychedelics. And she established the Beckley Foundation. And the Beckley Foundation has been leading psychedelic research for, the last handful of decades. I mean, they're really been at the forefront, so studying the compounds, for all different types of applications, and then also influencing drug policy all over the world because, she knew that needed to change as well. So they've been pushing both. And, Americans on average are probably more familiar with MAPS, and Rick Doblin in the U.S. and the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. The Beckley Foundation was, is very similar in kind of like ethos and what they're trying to do. They're just in Europe, but Amanda and Rick are like old time friends, and they've been working on this stuff, and so that's been happening for the last few decades, and they've been leading research. And I mean, it's really because of a handful of kind of those Renaissance men and women that we're having these conversations today, because they've been pushing the policy and the research that we can now look to and say, hey, this is obvious, people, like, come on. And so it's been beautiful being around this, because for most of her life, the world thought she was nuts. She was so fringe. All these people that kept this stuff alive, over the last few decades, so fringe. And now the entire world is like, well, okay, we're seeing it. And so she's having this period of recognition that she so much deserves. And then, just this past year, she was in Forbes as the queen of the psychedelic renaissance, and she's just getting all of this cool publicity, and she's brilliant. She deserves it. And now her sons, she's got two sons, Rock and Cosmo, which, those names check out for a woman that has been doing psychedelics for basically her entire life. And they're amazing. And they got, they've been obviously very close to this world for their whole lives. And they saw these shifts happening over the last handful of years. And you start to see this capital coming into the system and the public perceptions changing. And I think a lot of them in that circle were like, well, we've been doing this as a nonprofit, but, for us to scale this and to kind of be a bit of a counter to maybe some of the less, like the non-ethical money coming in, that's just are unashamed to say it's just about margin, to be a bit of a counter to that, and say, no, we can do this mindfully. I mean, we can do this. We can be a conscious organization and do this. And let's set the standard around that. So they put together, which became Beckley Waves, which is a venture studio, and they were looking to make seed investments in early stage psychedelic companies. But it was much more about like, who's got the right heart, who's got the right ethos, who's going to go build an organization that's an example for the industry on like how to do it right, like to have good benefit sharing with the communities, which is mindful about showing homage to the indigenous people that have held these lineages for so like is going to do this right and not just try and be extractive and suck as much money out of it as they can. They're like, we've got to do this. So this was their vehicle to do that. And and then Beckley SciTech got started kind of out of that, and then Cosmo is the CEO of that, and they're doing drug development, and they've had some very successful financial rounds, and they've got an incredible team. So keep an eye on them these next few years. And then Retreats is another business that they have made investments in with me. And we can talk more about that, how that all kind of came together. And then they have Beckley Academy, which is doing therapist training. And then they've got some others kind of small, minority stake investments in lots of different, companies kind of in the ecosystem. And then now they're really focusing on, the drug development is an important piece of this, but the infrastructure is a really important piece of this too. Like we need the therapists, you need the facilities, And you got to find people that are going to do that stuff with heart and do it ethically. And so they're trying to help, people, help build that ecosystem.
And it was fascinating. I remember I was talking with a few friends back in 2018, one of whom was an early investor in Synthesis, and he ended up becoming quite close with Amanda. And it sounded like the timing was perfect in terms of what happened with the psychedelic renaissance, and all the investment coming in particular, because I know Maps and Beckley, like I think Beckley started in 98, I believe. So for over 20 years, Maps is, 85 or 86, 20 to 30 to 40 years, they'd been solely dependent on nonprofit funds. I got that creates a lot of stress, for everyone. And so now to have an opportunity, like you said, to strike that balance between, no, we are, SciTech and the Academy and retreats, it is a for-profit model, but it isn't about extractivism. It isn't about purely shareholder value. There's a balance there, and it really is about the heart and the integrity and the longevity of what it is that you're creating.
Yeah. And I mean, this is kind of I believe so firmly in this. Like, I don't think that capitalism in and of itself is bad. It's a tool, and it's basically, it's doing what it's designed to do. Like the equation is really, really simple. It's just that it needs to have checks and balances in place so that it doesn't go to the extreme, which is focusing all of the resources that are generated into a very small group. We can have more distributed kind of equity and resource, mechanisms, so that as organizations grow, they're more fully owned by the communities, more fully owned by the practitioners, like the people that are part of it. And then I think this is actually what the world needs. The world doesn't, nonprofits are amazing and they serve their purpose. But I think, like, for us to have broad change in across the world, is like, we need this next generation of entrepreneurs to think differently about capitalism and how they're going to build their organizations. It's hugely important.
Which I think dovetails well with what you're building with Beckley Retreats. And so we started with, the craftsmanship and the family business, and then went into your story, and now heard a little bit about Beckley. And I'd love if you could just tell us then a little bit more about the story about how did Beckley Retreats come together? How were you chosen as the CEO, and what have you learned so far, and sort of starting to get this off the ground, so to say, because it's still early days, and
super early days. Yeah. Well, a lot of luck and timing, like many things in my life, but so I left the corporate world. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I wasn't going to, like, keep chasing money at the expense of my own well-being. And I knew that I wanted to do something that I believed in and was proud of, and wasn't, like, half embarrassed to tell people what I was doing. And so I ended up in Mexico, and I just got super back into meditation. I was meditating, like, a lot, like hours a day, like I had been doing kind of 10 years previously, or 8 years previously. And I got back into using psychedelics again, mostly psilocybin. The Huichol people are there, and I was in Sayulita, Mexico, and Mexico City, and kind of that western part, and got to spend some time with them and just be in a different environment, very close to nature. I was in the ocean every day. I was surfing, and then I started leading morning runs, just getting a group together, and then we would meditate, do a morning run and then meditate. And then those became, afternoon sessions where we would run, meditate, or take some psilocybin, run, meditate, paint some driftwood, or like just sit and be, or go on a nature walk. And I was just kind of like playing around for a while. And I had been on a bunch of programs years prior. I'd done a lot of different psychedelic retreats, and I'd done a lot of different meditation programs and had learned a lot. And so then I started kind of just putting things together, different modules that I had done. I'm a big fan of MBSR meditation. So we were doing that with psychedelics and breath work and mindful movement. and did that for a while, but it was super, you know, unstructured. And then I don't know, a year into it or something, I kind of got to this point where I was like, oh, this is what I want to do, you know, in some way, shape, or form. You know, the time is now. Like the world is opening up to this stuff. I believe in it. I love it. It's like a passion of mine. I love meditation, teaching meditation, meditating myself, you know, meditating with others. And I was like, I think this is what I want to do, and I want to figure out a way to do it in a big way, you know, in a real way. And I also, yeah, I mean, I've got this like ranger in me still, you know, that was seeing some of the, you know, bad actors maybe coming into the space that will leave unknown. But it's like, it's clear there are people moving into psychedelics. They give a damn about, you know, individuals really, or give a damn about our planet. It's like, I'm trying to suck as much money out of this thing in as like short a time as I can. And that kind of pisses me off, you know, that gets me going a little bit. And so I was like, well, we've got to try and rally. There's enough good people in this industry. How do we kind of like, you know, start working together and be a counter to that negative force that's coming in? And yeah, I started reaching out to old friends from grad school and thinking about where I could find some partners. And it was pretty quickly, I realized that one of the partners in Beckley Waves, Dan Love, was a classmate of mine. And it was kind of just like serendipitous timing. So I'm like running these scrappy retreats, you know, calling them even retreats in Mexico is probably a bit of a stretch. They're just kind of like, you know, hangs. But I was thinking about wanting to do, you know, these like more formal professional programs that would be more accessible to the skeptics and to the average, you know, run of the mill white collar professionals, was kind of like how I was coming at it. And I got connected with Dan, and he was like, well, it's kind of interesting. We've been really hoping to get into retreats. And they had actually done a pretty, you know, wide scan of retreats out there and interviewed a lot of the management. And then, you know, I think what they said was they had tons and tons of people that had amazing hearts and like could run a single retreat operation. But there's a big difference between that and like scaling an organization and having seen something at scale, you know. And they're like, we think that, you know, we do want to build something at scale, but for lots of reasons. One, you can get the costs way down and make it way more accessible. But, you know, they had big dreams too. And then I came along, and it was just this really kind of serendipitous connection. I needed a network and a brand and some kind of support, you know, and they needed someone that could that believed in this stuff and could be an operator and bring a good team together. So it was a good match. And apparently, a couple months before we even got connected, they were having conversations and saying like, you know, if we could, we would love to find a veteran that could kind of lead the organization, because it's the one bipartisan issue in the United States right now is like psychedelics for veteran healing. And veterans can speak about this stuff, you know, a little bit more forcefully, I guess you could say. And you know, Americans will listen. So like, you know, if we could find a veteran, that'd be great. But they were almost like, and then I showed up, and it was like, well, let's do this together. You know, it's such a perfect match. And then, yeah, I mean, it's been really incredible.
So I'm curious, like, I think you've done your first retreat in Jamaica. I don't know if it was the first official retreat. I know you have a retreat coming up, I believe, next week in the Netherlands. You have you have several retreats in the fall as well, which I want to hear a little bit more about. But just tell us some of the lessons you've learned so far and sort of getting this up and going, and, you know, having that first retreat and now rolling out additional retreats. What is it that it continues to excite you, and what are you really passionate about, and what are some of the challenges that you're finding with just starting this as a model? And like, I did this myself 4 years ago with Synthesis, you know, and helped to do the first 8 retreats, and then I stepped out. So I know some of the excitement that comes with launching and the inevitable challenges of real people dealing with real shit when they're coming into a circle and context, right?
Yeah. I mean, getting to see people before and after is incredible, right? And oftentimes, the feedback has been pretty consistent, but people will be like, to say it was completely life-changing is an understatement. I mean, that's powerful, right? And to give people this whole new sense of awareness and then help them, kind of help give them the tools to kind of, adopt a new way of being that's more positive for them and the people around them is, I don't know, there's not much more that I think is more inspiring than that. It's amazing. There's some of the science around like where trauma is, I'm sure you're familiar with the body keeps the score. And, this theory that our memory, it's actually kind of like deep in our tissues. It's even in our genetic makeup. And we don't understand all the mechanics of like how this happens, but these plants, it looks like they allow this, like these deep traumas to kind of surface and move on. And so they actually have like some impact on the way, like our muscles and our tissues and like the way we hold our body and like the muscles in our face and the inflammation in our body and all these things. So people look different, oftentimes you're just like, you look like a different person. You look lighter, and it's hard to describe, but there's these real kind of like deep changes that can happen. And it like gives me chills talking about it, so that's been fun. And I think that, the mystical experience in and of itself is powerful and transformational. I do think that we're doing a really good job of getting people ready to have that experience and then helping them afterwards integrate and like make the most of that experience. And I think we've been getting that feedback too, which I think is, I think Synthesis does an amazing job of this as well. But there's lots of organizations out there that I don't think have as keen of a mind on this. And like, it's just more about just the mystical experience. And I think they're leaving a lot on the table, you know what I mean? And I think that you're increasing the risk quite a bit too. But for certain, leaving a lot on the table by not having good pre and post. So yeah, I mean, that's inspiring. I mean, the challenges, it's complex. I mean, now we're thinking, I didn't even think about this, but we've got to worry about currency fluctuations between Jamaica and the United States. Paying practitioners and facilities in Jamaican dollars. Well, who the hell thought about that a year ago when we were doing the financial projections? Not me. And the complex, there's complexity too. It's fascinating, but it's complex around the practitioners, because the practitioners, these are artists, right? These are artisans. And many of them have been operating kind of like off, like out of, underground and kind of doing their own thing. And now we're trying to kind of like professionalize the industry a bit. So we have protocols and standards and insurance and, contracts and a lot of these like things. There's going to be there's some rub there, but it's to be expected, and look, I mean, any big kind of new thing, there's, by definition, you're going to kind of like have some rubs around the edges because you're making some big change. So I don't know. I think I've been in some extremely challenging situations before, and I think I've gotten to a point where I'm able to look at them now with like curiosity, and again, like I so believe in this work, even the challenging things, I'm almost like, we're doing like, this is a first, or like, one of few that are kind of like breaking through this and figuring this stuff out. And so it's energizing to me, it's like what this work we're doing and bringing this stuff to the world is so fascinating.
To be an innovator in that way, right? And it's like the upside of that is you get to create from a very authentic place, and the things that you create often haven't been brought through before, which then feels very validating, and I don't mean validating in terms of like from an insecure perspective, but validating in terms of, wow, this is actually resonating with people and it's beautiful to see how it's shifting and changing lives. The downside of that in my own experience has been, it sometimes feels like you're laying the railroad track as the train is coming down. And if you don't lay it quick enough, you're about to get blasted and run over. So there's that element as well, you know?
Well, yeah, I hear you. And I'm trying to, I think in the typical US business world, particularly like the, venture kind of startup world, it's Zuckerberg's move fast and break things, right? Like this. And to me, I don't think that applies to this work. Like it can't. I think that actually we need to move at the divine pace or the natural pace, like in accordance with how the natural world is moving along with us. We don't want to break things. These are human beings, and we don't need to be in a hurry.
Right.
To me, I'm like, how do we do this in a mindful way and move at the right pace? Now, I do believe that we're helping people, so it's like we want to help more people, but we can't be in such a rush that we become mindless, and we're not. We've got to do this right. You know what I mean? And so we've got to slow the train down, and make sure that we do have the rails in place. But it's a daily energetic check to make sure that I'm not over my skis and not then,
Right.
Getting the organization over our skis. But there's a lot of tension. There's tension there, right?
There is. I love the quote, slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Smooth is fast. That's a special operations quote.
Is it really?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where it came. We would use it all the time. Right. That's when rangers go and they clear rooms. I mean, you can move quickly, right? But that's not frantic, and we sometimes conflate the two together. It's like, and I also think like in the special operations community, there was this idea around like tactical pauses that you don't really see in the business community. It's like, you always need to be like pinging around and faster is better, all the time. But like in the special operations world, it was like, yeah, there was times you did need to move like very quickly, and you needed to kind of, move with some power. But then there was times where you needed to just like kind of sit and see how things were going to develop and like take a tactical pause and take a breath. And I don't think we take enough breaths in the corporate America. And this is why this why these, a function of these toxic work environments.
And why a technique like MSBR, which is it MSBR or MBSR?
MBSR.
MBSR, which you mentioned, and just to explain to the audience, it's mindfulness-based stress reduction. It was started by John Kabat-Zinn. It's similar to like Vipassana in some ways, right? Like there's overlap or commonality.
Yeah, there's lots. I mean, it's just awareness of the present moment. Right. Super simple, but not easy. Yeah. And I love it so much because when I found it, I had no real interest in Buddhism or like kind of a spiritual approach. I just wanted to feel better. And so MBSR, Kabat-Zinn was a doctor, and he studied in the East, and he was like, oh my God, this is like transformational stuff here. But I'm a Western doctor, and they're going to like laugh at me if I come back in robes. And so he kind of sanitized it a bit. And he took out, and not a bit, a lot. He took out, all of the kind of like religious ties and was just like pragmatic. Hey, it's just awareness of the present moment. It's just watching your breath. And then you can still get all these amazing measurable benefits. So to me, it was accessible at the time. And I think for a lot of people too, it can be that first step into this world. Now, I would say now 10 years later, my whole, perspective on spirituality and everything is completely different. But it kind of started through this very non-spiritual, very kind of sanitized way.
Well, and if I remember, the core of it was all these people in a corporate workspace, let's say, because he was working out of Boston and, like sort of the Northeast. It was, they had all this chronic stress that was
Chronic
leading
stress,
to incredible health issues, right? And that by just doing this 8-week program, I think it was an 8-week program, MBSR, like all these normal things that, or not all these normal things, all these issues that people are having all of a sudden would start to disappear and go away simply because of the mindfulness practice, which was when I started to get into meditation 10, 12 years ago, it was like, holy shit, that's incredible. And what I'm trying to draw the parallel between is there's an overlap between that. And I think probably the demographic that you're intending to serve with Beckley Retreats, those where it might be their first step into psychedelics, or maybe they haven't gone to a retreat before. You're welcoming them into an environment that's safe. And we got 10 minutes or so left of the podcast. So I'd love to just drill down a little bit, like, what is Beckley Retreats about? What is sort of the program? Who are you bringing in to lead and guide those? Just kind of give us the 411 on, like, what are you creating with these retreats? What's sort of the structure and the flow and the format of them?
Yeah. Well, it's usually 15 to 20 participants, and it's an 11-week program, which is 4 weeks of preparation, which is done digitally, which is a series of calls with the group. So we do a handful of things. We kind of get the group dynamic started, which is really important. We teach some of the basic well-being practices, so like meditation, some breathwork exercises, to simplify it. We try and get people to take a little bit better care of themselves. If it's preferred if you can get the mind and the body in a bit more alignment and the central nervous system a bit more settled down when you come into one of these programs. So that's like what we're trying to do. And then, the intention setting and getting people to kind of like journal and really kind of contemplate like where they're at, why are they doing this, what do they want out of it, real benefit in that. And then the retreats, 6 days in person, lots of meditation. To me, meditation's foundational. A lot of times I think it gets bucketed in with like a lot of these other kind of well-being things. And to me, it's like, no, this is the base, so meditation's a big part of the program. And then we teach breath work. We do some Western psychotherapy type modules in a group. It's very kind of research informed programming. And then on day 2 and day 4, we have psilocybin sessions. And those
high
are
dose.
Usually 6 hours
Correct.
long. High dose. Yeah, high dose. So 3 to 6 grams, depending on, everybody gets their own dose, which is a function, it's a discussion between them and whoever the lead practitioner is, but it's like a function of, previous trauma, kind of current level of anxiety. Some people come in very comfortable and they're ready. And some people, they want to do a little, they want to tip their foot in, dip their foot in. So that first one can be a good opportunity to do that. And then the second one, for most people, a lot of people coming have had psychedelic experiences, but they've been a bit traumatic. So there are definitely some anxiety, and it's like they didn't have the setting right. You know what I mean? Like these things are actually incredibly safe if you get the setting right. So, people come and they have that first experience, and they learn that it's not as scary, and actually you can steer it and kind of and understand a bit what's going on. So they'll go a little bit larger in the second session, and then. Yeah, I mean, some intentional, I think this is actually really important, and why a retreat model is probably going to be, it can be more helpful than a clinic model. Is there's intentional, like just downtime, which is actually really important. You get people off their devices and you get them in nature and you just let them sit and be for a while. I'm a big believer in that actually a lot of the newness and things like the change actually comes in the space. So you got to create space for people, and then that's when they can get the kind of some shifts. And then on the back end, we have 6 weeks of digital. Everybody goes home. We have 6 weeks of digital integration, which is led by the lead, facilitator. With weekly group calls, and I mean, I'm sure you've heard it a million times, and probably most of your listeners have too. But this metaphor around, by the time you get to be a middle-aged adult, a lot of how we show up in the world is these deep, deep emotional and subconscious patterns, and we're quite a bit on autopilot. And you can think about those as ruts on like a ski mountain. It's really hard to turn out of them. You're going to likely go down that same path that you've been going down, where if high dose psilocybin, high dose psychedelics, it's kind of this fresh layer of snow. Now, you can still end up going down those old paths, right? But if you do the work and you plan and you have like the right support around you, you can chart new paths in this fresh snow. It's like the brain is in this malleable state. It's easier to make change during this window, so we try and take advantage of that window.
And that's a Mendel Kaelin quote. I always love to, because people think of it as Michael Pollan, but Mendel was the one who came up with that. And just to bring this back, Mendel's research was supported by the Beckley Foundation because he was at Imperial College back in the day. So it all comes full circle.
It all comes around. Yeah. One of the studies that was super impactful to my perceptions was David Nutt's study, 2010, the UK drug harm study. Right. And so I read that when I was in grad school and was doing all the psychedelics and was doing all this meditation. I was like, oh my God, like the world's just got this whole thing wrong. And I remember it was in The Economist, and I remembered like it being meaningful to me. Now, however many years later, to realize that was Amanda that in the Beckley Foundation that designed that study and was like the brilliance behind that study. It was kind of cool to have that come full circle on me too.
That's beautiful. And just, knowing what we had developed, what I had helped to develop with synthesis, I haven't been involved for some time. And now seeing Beckley come out, I spoke with Jaya, who's one of the co-founders and helping with experience design probably a year and a half ago about this initially, when she was starting to put together some of the ideas. And I think what you've built is it's really landing the most critical components. And I just sort of want to go back and reemphasize a few things for our listeners that I think are key. The 15 to 20 participants, I think, is essential. There are some retreats that you probably know of that are doing 50 to 75 to 100, which is highly irresponsible. 15 to 20 feels like a really good dynamic in terms of you get to know everyone really well. And it's also small enough that people can really move through things. The prep and the integration, right? This isn't just a 6-day retreat. It's really an 11-week program. I think that's also really essential to emphasize. And then I what I also love is like the emphasis on the meditation. And I love what you said about how essential it is. When often I talk about sort of habit formation, building habits, I often refer to meditation as sort of like the keystone essential habit. Even more so than breath work or yoga or any of these things, because to learn true stillness is so anathema to our cultural conditioning. And to be able to like let go of all the noise and drop into that, it then opens up a spaciousness within a psychedelic experience where, like you said, you can then learn how to navigate it. Like, people have more control than they think. They also don't, which is the paradox of psychedelics. But knowing that you can navigate that and drop into the breath, I think is so key for it. And then I think the final piece is like psychotherapists and musicians, right? You brought in really top line folks all across the board to really offer a premium product, which I think is key.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think we're doing something that's super special, and I think synthesis is incredible too. And they're up in the standards, and we're learning from them. And I hope that we'll keep collaborating on work together. Even people that have done a proper psilocybin ceremony with a single facilitator in nature or something and had a profound experience, I would still encourage them, when the time is right, come see. When you get together 5 or 6 facilitators that are also musicians, and you have to see it to believe it, right? Like, these are real artisans of this craft, and it is a beautiful thing to watch them do this magical work that is it's beyond explanation. but everybody should get a chance to try it at some point in their life. It's really wild.
It's a vortex, a vortex of creation and, like you said, magic, which is beautiful to exist in.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I love that Einstein quote. You know, he's like, "There's two ways to live your life. One as if nothing's a miracle, and the other as if everything's a miracle." And I think when you do this work, you see that it's obvious. You know, everything's a miracle.
I love that. Well, final sort of, not even thought, but just if folks want to learn more about Beckley Retreats, if they're maybe interested in attending one of the upcoming retreats, where can they go find out more information about what's coming up?
Yeah, BeckleyRetreats.com is our site. And then, I mean, they can reach out to me. I love talking about this stuff, you know, so they can email me, and we can find some time to get to connect on the calendar. And yeah, thanks so much, Paul. I appreciate this.
This is fun, Neil. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for your patience. I know we had to reschedule once, and coming on early even today to make this happen. It was fun.
All good, man. My pleasure.
Thanks so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date on the third wave of psychedelics, subscribe to this channel and visit thethirdwave.co, where you'll find plenty of free resources on intentional and responsible psychedelic use.